Fact. In 1974, Stanley Milgram conducted this experiment at Harvard University. Ordinary men and women were brought in to participate in what they were told was a study in memory. They were to play the role of teachers. They were to read a series of words to a person sitting behind a partition. That person was called the learner. The learner was strapped to an electric chair while the teacher watches. Fact. The teacher has in front of him a row of levers labeled from 15 to 450 volts and a row of switches labeled from slight to severe shock. At 300 volts, the learner suffers permanent damage. At 450 volts, the final, death. A scientist is with the teacher. He instructs the teacher to move up one level higher on the shock generator every time the learner makes a mistake. The teacher is supposed to test the learner's memory. He reads the learner a word with 4 possible answers. If the learner gets the answer correct, they move on. If the learner answers incorrectly, the teacher shocks the learner. He moves from 15 to 450 volts. The learner makes mistakes. The teacher administers shocks. As the shock level increases, the learner starts to protest behind the wall. At 100 volts, he begins to shout. At 200 volts, he pleads with the teacher. At 250 volts, he screams. At 300 volts, he kicks the partition wall. At 450 volts, he stops moving or making any noise at all. He is dead. 65% of the subjects went all the way to the maximum level, and no one stopped before 300 volts. Fact. There were no shocks at all.
The teacher thought they were administering shocks to the learner, but the learner was actually an actor who was never really harmed. This was an experiment in obedience to authority known as the Milgram experiment.